Scientists just spotted something in the climate data that has only happened one other time ever. And that one other time, it triggered the hottest year the planet has ever recorded. Now, the exact same setup is happening again, right now, in real time. If the pattern follows through the way it did last time, the record books are about to get rewritten all over again. To understand why this matters, you need to understand how global temperatures actually swing from year to year. It is not random. Much of it comes down to a cycle happening deep in the Pacific Ocean called the El Niño Southern Oscillation. This cycle flips between two opposite states. One is called La Niña, when the central and eastern Pacific runs cooler than normal. The other is El Niño, when that same stretch of ocean turns unusually warm. These shifts do not just affect the ocean. They ripple out and reshape weather patterns across the entire planet, from rainfall in the Amazon to temperatures in Europe to wildfire risk in Australia. Here is where it gets interesting. In late 2023, the planet moved out of a stretch of La Niña conditions and swung hard into a powerful El Niño. That single transition helped push 2023 into second place for the hottest year ever recorded at the time. And it did not stop there. The heat that built up during that El Niño carried straight into the following year. 2024 shattered the record completely, becoming the hottest year humanity has ever measured, and the first year to temporarily cross the symbolic 1.5 degrees Celsius warming threshold set out in the Paris Agreement. Now here is the part scientists are watching closely. At the start of this year, the planet was sitting in a weak La Niña phase, similar in some ways to conditions just before that 2023 shift. Global temperatures for the opening months of the year were still historically high, ranking among the warmest starts to any year ever measured. But the ocean pattern itself was in its cooler phase. Scientists have now confirmed that this weak La Niña is fading. Fast and a strong, possibly even a super El Niño, is expected to develop by early autumn. That sequence, weak La Niña early in the year, followed by a rapid swing into a powerful El Niño by the back half of the same year, is almost identical to what happened in 2023. According to climate researchers tracking this pattern, a transition this close in timing and intensity to the 2023 shift has essentially only been observed once before. That is why this moment is getting so much attention inside the climate science community right now. This would not be the first time an El Niño reshaped a full year of global weather. The 2014 to 2016 El Niño was, at the time, one of the strongest ever recorded, and it pushed global temperatures to what were then unprecedented levels. The El Niño before that, back in 1997 and 1998, triggered floods, droughts, and wildfires across multiple continents simultaneously, and remained the benchmark for extreme El Niño events for years afterward. What sets the current situation apart is not just the strength of this coming event, but how closely its build-up timeline mirrors the 2023 sequence, a similarity researchers say is genuinely rare in the historical record. If history repeats the way it did last time, the implications are significant. The 2023 to 2024 transition did not just nudge global temperatures up slightly. It helped produce the single hottest year ever recorded, a year where extreme heat waves hit nearly every continent, where ocean temperatures broke records for months on end, and where wildfire seasons stretched longer and burned hotter than almost anything on record. If this new transition follows a similar path, scientists are warning that 2027 could be the year that finally overtakes 2024 as the hottest year in recorded history. The consequences of a strong El Niño rarely stay confined to temperature charts. Past events have disrupted rainfall patterns severely enough to damage harvests across entire regions. Southeast Asia and parts of southern Africa have historically seen sharp drops in rainfall during strong El Niño years, straining crops like rice, corn, and coffee at exactly the moment global food demand keeps climbing. Meanwhile, parts of South America and the southern United States tend to see the opposite problem, with El Niño often bringing heavier than normal rainfall and a higher risk of flooding. That uneven split, drought in some regions and flooding in others, all driven by the same underlying ocean pattern, is part of why El Niño years tend to generate outsized economic damage compared with typical years. The ocean itself is already sending signals that something significant is building. Climate monitors confirmed that the first half of this year saw sustained, exceptional warmth across the world's oceans, warmth that researchers describe as pushing into completely uncharted territory. One senior climate official put it plainly, saying that with ocean temperatures already this high and a powerful El Niño still forming, more temperature records are likely to fall in the months ahead, not fewer. This is not just an abstract number on a chart either. Rising ocean heat directly fuels extreme weather on land. Warmer oceans pump more moisture into the atmosphere, which can intensify hurricanes and typhoons. They also disrupt the jet stream and other major wind patterns, which helps explain why so many regions have already experienced unusual record-breaking heat waves this year. months before the coming El Nino has even fully developed. Recent attribution studies add real weight to these warnings. Scientists analyzing this year's early heat waves across Europe found that the extreme temperatures recorded would have been virtually impossible just 50 years ago, before decades of additional greenhouse gas emissions reshaped the baseline climate. Researchers compared this year's heat directly against the historic heat waves of 1976 and 2003, once considered the gold standard for extreme European heat, and found that today's baseline conditions have shifted so far that similar heat waves are now dramatically more likely and noticeably more intense than anything those earlier generations experienced. Independent research groups analyzing global temperature data are already forecasting where this year is likely to land. Multiple datasets currently place this year as the second warmest ever recorded, trailing only 2024. But that ranking comes with a warning attached. Because the El Nino driving global temperatures higher is still developing, the real spike in heat is expected to show up not this year, but next year, exactly the same delayed pattern that turned 2023 into a stepping stone toward the record-shattering heat of 2024. The Southern Hemisphere has already offered a preview of what an intensifying pattern like this can look like on the ground. Earlier this year, a record-setting heat dome pushed temperatures in Australia close to 50 degrees Celsius, while catastrophic wildfires tore through remote parts of Argentina's Patagonia region and swept across coastal towns in Chile, claiming multiple lives. South Africa, at the same time, dealt with some of its worst wildfire activity in years. Notably, much of that extreme heat occurred while the planet was still technically under the cooling influence of La Niña, which is exactly why scientists say the shift toward El Nino is so concerning. If these extremes are already showing up before the warming pattern even fully arrives, the concern is how much further conditions could escalate once it does. Scientists have also pointed to a deeper, more uncomfortable trend sitting underneath all of this. The 11 hottest years ever recorded have all happened since 2015. Every single one. That is not a coincidence tied to one single ocean cycle. It reflects a steady, accelerating background warming trend driven by greenhouse gas emissions, with El Nino events acting like a spike layered on top of an already rising baseline. Even the La Niña years, in recent memory, have still ranked among the warmest years ever recorded, which was almost unheard of in past decades. Official forecasts reflect just how confident scientists have become in this trajectory. International weather agencies now estimate an 86% chance that at least 1 year between now and 2030 will beat the current 2024 heat record. They also estimate a 91% chance that global temperatures will temporarily cross the 1.5 degree threshold again, at least once during that same stretch. Some researchers go even further, arguing that the world may already be living inside the first years of a 20-year period that will average above that threshold, even if individual cooler years still show up occasionally within it. Not every scientist agrees on the exact pace of what comes next, and that disagreement is part of what makes this moment worth watching closely. Some researchers believe the recent run of extreme heat fits neatly within existing climate models, driven by the predictable combination of greenhouse gases and natural cycles like El Nino. Others argue the planet may be warming even faster than those models suggest, pointing to satellite measurements showing a growing imbalance between the sunlight reaching Earth and the heat radiating back out to space. That imbalance has reportedly doubled in recent years, a signal some scientists say hints at an acceleration nobody fully predicted. A separate research team, led by climate scientists in the United States, reached a more measured conclusion, arguing that standard climate models can still explain the recent surge in heat without needing to invoke any new, unexplained mechanism. That disagreement between research groups does not mean either side is wrong. It simply reflects how difficult it is to separate a genuine acceleration in warming from the normal, expected spike that comes with a strong El Nino layered on top of a steadily rising baseline. Back half of this year, even before the coming El Nino fully peaks. Expect ocean temperatures to remain unusually high, which raises the risk of more intense hurricane and typhoon seasons in multiple ocean basins. Expect regions that already experience brutal heat waves this year, including parts of Europe, the United States, and the Southern Hemisphere, to face an even higher baseline risk of extreme heat as this pattern fully develops. And if the historical parallel holds, the real headline event may not even be this year, and maybe next year, in 2027, when the full strength of this El Nino works its way through the global climate system the same way it did following the 2023 transition. That is the pattern scientists say has only repeated once before in the modern climate record, and it just started happening again. Before you go, if you want to understand exactly how this plays out in real time, make sure you like this video and subscribe, because we'll be tracking every major update as this pattern develops through the rest of the year. The last time this exact sequence played out, it rewrote the record books within 12 months. Scientists are now watching to see whether history is about to repeat itself for only the second time ever. And this time, the starting point is already hotter than it was before. That last detail is the one worth sitting with. Every previous El Niño in history has built on top of a slightly cooler baseline than the one before it. This time, the baseline itself is already elevated by years of accumulated warming, meaning the same strength of El Niño could realistically push global temperatures into territory the planet has simply never experienced in the era of modern record-keeping. Whether that plays out exactly as scientists expect will become clearer over the next several months, as the developing El Niño either strengthens on schedule or shifts course. Either way, the data streaming in right now is exactly what researchers will be pointing back to when they explain how the next record-breaking year came together.